Guarded matzah. Shmura comes from the word shamur, which means
Zachor.
like zachor and shamor. Shamor means to guard, to keep it safe.
And remember.
So shmura means to keep the matzah guarded. So technically what that means is that from the moment there is a possibility for the wheat, for the grain to come into contact with water, which would then make it chametz. Chametz means leavened. It should be guarded to make sure that it does not come into contact with water. So regularly, matzah is guarded once it leaves the mill and goes to the matzah bakery to produce the dough, which then is turned into matzah. And that would be considered regular matzah. Shmura matzah would mean that it's guarded even before it leaves the mill, from when it enters the mill. Because from when it enters the mill until it goes out in sacks, which is already made flour, there could be a lot of things going on. I mean, that flour could be, the mill can have water on it. It's not necessarily 100% dry. So shmura matzah would mean that you're guarding those kernels from the moment it comes into the mill. So that the mill is dry, and the pails are dry, and the pipes are dry, and the sacks are dry, and no moisture gets in whatsoever. There's even a further stringency that the shmura, the guarding procedure, starts even before it comes to the mill, when it's still in the field, when it's being picked. That somebody physically goes up and down and looks at the stalks of wheat and sees if any of them are split, which means that water can go inside them. Those are non-usable. And only those that are 100% whole are taken away and brought to the mill. Now, once they're already completely ready and dried out, they are no longer getting their source of nourishment of water from the ground. They're getting it from any others from outside. Then we have already a possibility for chametz. So as soon as the stalks are completed growing with the in-ground water, they're immediately cut off and brought to the mill. So the shmura actually begins from after the harvest, at the harvest of the kernels itself, which is a major thing. You have rabbis going out to the fields, monitoring, measuring, collecting it, seeing how it's brought together and put onto a truck, seeing how it's brought to the mill, overseeing the whole process of the mill, and then ultimately from the mill coming to the bakery and watching that whole process, which we know by now has to take less than 18 minutes from beginning to end, from the moment the water touches the flour until it's completed.
Who does the picking of the wheat?
People that are being overseen by a rabbi, or by somebody who's making sure that there's no moisture, there's no water, there's no fluid, nothing comes near it.
Why cannot water touch the wheat? What's the significance as to why the water and the wheat have to be so?
Leaven means that it starts to rise. And what happens is that once the kernels are dry, okay, even before they're cut off, if they're no longer getting their nourishment from the ground, they can ferment with water and turn into chametz.
So regular matzah could be considered chametz?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The kernel could be considered chametz. Because the kernel, if the kernel is fermenting, and the water helps it ferment and rise, even if it's a tiny drop, it's already considered chametz, but it hasn't yet even been cut off.
So regular,
the moment it has the opportunity to ferment, it already you have to make sure that it doesn't come into contact with water. Because if it does, you have a problem.
It's not guarded.
Not guarded?
It's not chametz, but it's not guarded matzah.
I don't know what it is, but I wouldn't have it at my seder, because you don't know. If you have no choice, and that's the only matzah that you have, fine. But if it's a difference between guarded matzah and not guarded matzah, I think at the seder we would want to have guarded matzah.
But isn't rabbinical supervision and over the Passover matzah, aren't they responsible to make sure that that doesn't happen? That there isn't any water? So there's a difference between...
They watch it from after it goes out of the sack, the flour is already produced, and until it gets to the box. What happens before that, they don't know. It's not that it's chametz, God forbid. You're talking about very, very stringent, maybe remote possibilities. But because it's so important, so the possibility goes all the way back to the field.
So basically you should make your own matzah. If you really
Yeah.
if you really want to guarantee,
Or
The
make
most-
sure that that you're buying it from someone who you trust 110%. The place where I got it from, I know the guy, I know where he
is
goes.
that Lakewood? Will we know?
No, no.
So there's matzah and a shmura matzah. There's kosher and there's more kosher than kosher.
Let's
Let's
stick to the Shmura matzah.
My nephew won't eat Hebrew National. It's not kosher enough.
That's not glatt kosher. That's a different
Okay.
thing.
So
Separate discussion. That means that the Torah is coming to do an additional action that is being done for the purpose of fulfilling God's commandment. We know that the word mitzvah also comes from the word tzavta, which means connection. And when we do a mitzvah, we connect to Hashem. So by doing a mitzvah, that's the way we're connecting, we're fulfilling the will of God. So when you say, put up a mezuzah, under normal circumstances, I wouldn't put up a mezuzah. I want to have a nice door frame. I don't want to have a piece of plastic or a piece of ceramic on my doorpost. Hashem said, so we're doing it because Hashem said. Food, eating food, you don't need a commandment of God to eat food. When a person's hungry, they eat breakfast, and then lunch, and then dinner, and then snack. Here, there's a mitzvah to eat matzah. So you might say the mitzvah is like extra because you're giving someone a mitzvah to eat matzah, which I would already eat anyway if I'd be hungry. So the fact that God is telling me to do this is not anything extra than what I would normally do myself.
Yeah, but you might not be eating matzah, you might be eating bread.
Fine. But in terms of the eating of the matzah, I can't eat chametz, I'm going to eat matzah. I can't eat jelly. What is the mitzvah of the matzah? Mitzvah of the matzah means that there's something more there. Not only that, we say that after the afikoman, we don't eat anything else or drink anything else. We don't put anything in our mouth for the rest of the night, even water. Why? Because you want the taste of the matzah to be lingering in your mouth for the entire night. That's how important the food, the ingestion of the matzah is. When you think about the reason for the matzah, we say on the Haggadah, matzah zu shanu eichlem al shumma. This matzah that we eat on the Seder plate, why do we eat it? Al shum shalai hispik betzekes shalaveseinu b'mitzrayim lachas, because there was not enough time for the dough that our ancestors were carrying to rise. And they made ugos matzahs, they made matzahs out of it. V'gam tzeidah le'yosulam, and they didn't even make any extra food besides the matzahs. They only relied on the matzahs. The only biblical mitzvah on the Seder is matzah. Even the wine doesn't say in the Torah and the Bible that you have to drink 4 cups of wine. The Talmud, the rabbinic law, commanded the 4 cups of wine based on the 4 expressions of redemption. But the biblical mitzvah for the night of Pesach is to eat matzah. So that's, you might say, the most important, most significant. And that's why there's such stringency that's involved and so many details that are involved with preparing the matzah and setting up the matzah and eating the matzah and digesting the matzah. There's a quote from one of the Chabad Rebbes that when you eat matzah, you're like eating godliness. That's how spiritually infused this heavenly food that we eat on the night of Pesach is. Why is it so important to eat this matzah? Why is it so important that there's so much detail involved in preparing the matzah? These words that says they didn't even prepare anything to take with them, so the commentaries explain that what happened here is that the Jewish people were so reliant on God that God would provide for them that they didn't prepare doggy bags to take with them into the journey. He said, "Well, how are we going to eat? God, Hashem will take care of us.
God will
provide." So what we see here is there's a certain faith that was demonstrated by the matzah event that the Jews said, if I'm not going to have food to eat, Hashem will provide food to eat. So the fact that they ate matzah and they didn't let it rise and they relied that the rest of their nourishment will come from Hashem, this is really the foundation of where the commandment of matzah comes. So it's not only that you're remembering something that happened when you eat the matzah. That's also true. You remember the Exodus when you eat the matzah. But that you can say, by having the matzah on the table, it's also enough to remember. I don't have to necessarily eat it. A lot of times you want to remember a certain incident, so you have a symbolic item on the table, and that reminds you of it. The fact that we're ingesting it shows that not only are we remembering symbolically, but we're also demonstrating that there was a certain element of faith that the Jews had when they left Egypt, that they knew that Hashem would provide for them. And that's why they didn't have to take doggy bags. Both aspects is only something external. You know, yeah, we want to remember the Exodus, so we eat this cracker. But it's not really something of a spiritual experience. It's more like of a symbolic memorial to something that happened thousands of years ago. Okay, so it demonstrates faith as well, fine. Similar to Shabbos. We know that God worked for 6 days creating the world, and on the seventh day He rested, so that became an everlasting sign that we believe in God by us working 6 days and resting on Shabbos. So by keeping Shabbos, we're demonstrating our belief in the Creator of the world. And just as He rested, we also rest.
Isn't the matzah the linkage between the Exodus and us today?
Yeah, but the matzah doesn't mean that you have to eat the matzah. You could look at the matzah, you can think about the matzah.
Yeah, but if you ingest it, you're really making that link spiritual, aren't you?
Why is it ingesting a spiritual link? Ingesting is a physical link. I would say that discussing it and meditating on it will be a spiritual link. Food, ingesting it is very physical. It's just the opposite. In a certain sense, eating it would be a degradation of the message of the matzah. Because you're kind of limiting it to a physical experience and you're removing the spiritual part of it. So perhaps it would be more aloof and more sublime if it'll just be looked at and studied and discussed rather than eaten.
Then why are you supposed to have 2 ounces?
We're discussing it, but we don't know. We're trying to figure this out. Why is it important to eat the matzah rather than reflect on the message of the matzah? We're ingesting the faith. We're saying that it becomes part of our bloodstream. And we're also giving ourselves healing. We're giving ourselves spiritual healing, which is the internal spiritual synchronization of the heart and the mind and the soul and the attributes and the garments and the emotions, so that everything is properly in line with Hashem. So imagine if you have such a mitzvah once a year, where all of a sudden it's a biblical commandment to eat. There is no other commandment in the Torah that says you have to eat a certain item of food. Only in this case it's an exception because the eating itself is the message. And it's a biblical mitzvah. And we have the opportunity to incorporate faith and incorporate healing and incorporate blessing through this mitzvah. How important it is that we do this mitzvah with great intensity, with great passion, with great excitement. We look forward to it, we prepare it. We want to have the best matzah possible because we want this experience on the night of the Seder, of the going out of Egypt, of the Exodus, of the going out of our own limitation, our own Egypt, and the ingestion of the faith, and the incorporating of the faith, and the message of the matzah with the healing should all be 100% proper. And that's why so much work and effort and toil and detail goes into the preparation of the matzah from the first moment until the last moment. Because it's a once-in-a-year opportunity to be able to connect to Hashem on a physical level, but yet at the same time in the most highest of spiritual levels. And hence the great sacrifice that people make to be able to get the most important and the most proper matzah and to experience it, which is what we're going to go do right now by going to witness the baking of the matzah, the Shmura matzah. So it just gives a little bit of a perspective on why it's so important.